She's hurt because you don't teach rules. Yeah.
I'm a former child crimes prosecutor. You're arrested!
The sound of my daughter's head hitting the conference table isn't something you forget, not a thud, a crack, the kind of sound that tells you bone met wood with force that shouldn't happen to a 10-year-old's skull. Emma collapsed, blood pooled beneath her unconscious body on the HOA office floor. Vanessa Hartley stood over my daughter and said, "She wouldn't have been hurt if you'd taught her to follow rules." "I'm a former prosecutor. You just committed felony assault on a minor. I'm calling 911, and then the police. My name is David Mitchell. I'm a family law attorney who spent 15 years in the Juvenile Crimes Division prosecuting one thing: adults who hurt children, domestic violence against minors, child endangerment, aggravated battery on kids. I've sent dozens of abusers to prison for physically injuring children in their care." The HOA president who slammed my daughter's head into furniture during a compliance meeting about a bicycle violation just became defendant in the exact type of case I specialized in prosecuting for 15 years. If you've ever made a promise to a dying spouse to protect your child and then watched someone hurt that child while you stood 3 feet away helpless, then hit subscribe now. Let me tell you why this matters more than HOA disputes or property violations. My wife Sarah died 2 years ago in a car accident. Her last coherent words before she slipped away: "Promise me you'll protect her. Promise me Emma will always be safe." I held Sarah's hand and made that promise. Last Tuesday, I watched the board chair grab my 10-year-old daughter's arm, shove her backward, and slam Emma's head into the edge of that conference table. I was 3 feet away in a windowless HOA office at a mandatory compliance meeting about Emma leaving her bicycle on our front lawn overnight. The pink bicycle Sarah bought Emma for her 8th birthday. The bike Sarah spent weeks teaching Emma to ride. The bicycle that represents Emma's healing after losing her mother. Because Emma couldn't touch it for a year after Sarah died. And when she finally started riding again, it meant she was going to be okay. Vanessa issued a $250 violation for recreational equipment storage. When I contested it, citing the covenant's permanent storage language, she doubled the fine and demanded Emma attend an intimidation session where a 52-year-old woman would lecture my grieving daughter about respecting community standards. Every instinct screamed, "Don't bring Emma into that room." But the HOA president threatened liens on our home, legal action, escalating fines if Emma didn't attend. She weaponized authority to force me to deliver my daughter into a situation designed to frighten her. Sarah would never have allowed it. I failed to protect Emma the way her mother would have. I watched, frozen, helpless, as Vanessa grabbed Emma's arm. When my daughter tried to pull away, the board chair shoved her so hard Emma's head cracked against the table edge. Emma collapsed unconscious, blood spreading beneath her from scalp laceration, concussion that would hospitalize her for 2 days. Vanessa looked at my bleeding, unconscious daughter and blamed me for not teaching rules. I broke Sarah's deathbed promise in a windowless room over a bicycle violation, but I remembered exactly how to prosecute adults who assault children. I'd built dozens of criminal cases against people who injured kids. I knew what aggravated battery on a minor looked like. I knew how to fast-track arrests when children are victims. And I knew that HOA authority provides absolutely zero protection from felony prosecution when you slam a 10-year-old's head into furniture. Emma was rushed to the hospital. Concussion. 12 stitches closing the scalp wound, monitoring for brain swelling. I stood beside her hospital bed and made a different promise, to myself and Sarah's memory. I had 72 hours before Vanessa's attorney could claim the assault was an accident, 72 hours before witnesses' memories faded, 72 hours to document evidence and get this woman arrested on felony charges. What happened in the next 96 hours destroyed the board chair's career, triggered criminal prosecution, and changed how Georgia treats HOA officials who target children. But it was what the judge said when he stood up from the bench during the preliminary hearing that made Vanessa realize she wasn't facing civil lawsuits. She was facing a family court judge who'd spent 20 years protecting children from adults like her. Where are you watching from? Because what a father who broke his dying wife's promise discovered about prosecuting the HOA president who hurt his daughter proved that some judges understand adults who assault children over bicycle violations deserve prison, not community service. The violation notice that started everything arrived 6 weeks before Vanessa put her hands on my daughter. Violation: recreational equipment stored in visible area, contrary to Section 12.4, Equipment Storage Standards. Fine, $250. Equipment will be confiscated if not removed within 24 hours. Emma's pink bicycle, left on our front lawn overnight after she'd been playing with neighborhood friends. I moved the bike to the garage within an hour and called the HOA office. This violation cites permanent storage. My daughter's bicycle was there for one night. That doesn't constitute a covenant violation. The secretary put me on hold, came back with the board chair's response. Mrs. Hartley has determined the violation stands. Contesting enforcement actions requires formal appeal with additional $250 processing fee. She's charging me to contest an inappropriate fine? Mrs. Hartley's decisions are final unless overturned by full board vote. I filed the appeal anyway, cited the actual covenant language, provided photos showing the bike had been moved immediately. Vanessa's response doubled the fine to $500 and added a new violation: failure to respect HOA authority, additional $250 fine. Then came the letter that changed everything. Mandatory compliance meeting scheduled. Both homeowner and minor resident Emma Mitchell must attend to address repeated violations and ensure future compliance understanding. I read that line 3 times. Minor resident must attend. She wanted my 10-year-old daughter at an HOA enforcement meeting. I called back immediately. Emma doesn't need to attend a compliance meeting. She's a child. Mrs. Hartley requires the minor's presence to ensure proper education about community standards. Failure to attend will result in daily fines of $100 and potential lien proceedings. You're threatening to put a lien on my house if my daughter doesn't attend an intimidation meeting? It's compliance education, Dr. Mitchell, 3 p.m. next Tuesday. Both of you must be present. I hung up and started researching Vanessa's enforcement history in Riverside Meadows. What I found made my blood run cold. The Martinez family, 2021, 8-year-old son left soccer ball in driveway. Vanessa issued violation, demanded child attend compliance meeting. Parents complied. Their son came home terrified, refused to play outside for months. Family sold their house within a year. The Chen family, 2022, 6-year-old drew chalk hopscotch on sidewalk. Violation issued for unapproved ground markings. Mandatory meeting with child required. Mrs. Chen told me later her grandson had nightmares about the mean HOA lady for 6 months after Vanessa lectured him about respecting property. The Thompson family, 2022, twins left bikes on lawn after birthday party. Double violations, both children required at meeting. Vanessa made them apologize to the board for disrespecting community standards. The family left Riverside Meadows 3 months later. The Patterson family, 2023, daughter's lemonade stand, violated unauthorized commercial activity rules. 9-year-old required to attend meeting where the HOA president explained why her fundraiser for animal shelter was inappropriate use of community space. Child cried through entire session. 15 families over 4 years, all with children, all targeted for normal childhood activities: toys in yards, chalk on driveways, bikes left overnight, outdoor play, birthday decorations. Every single case followed the same pattern. Violation issued, parents contested. Vanessa escalated and demanded child's attendance at compliance meeting. Children traumatized by being lectured about rules and consequences. Families eventually left the neighborhood. The board chair had been systematically driving families with children out of Riverside Meadows by weaponizing enforcement against kids, and now she wanted Emma in that windowless conference room. Every protective instinct told me to refuse, to fight the fines, accept the lien threat, keep my daughter away from this woman who used fear and humiliation as enforcement tools against children. But I'd watched families lose their homes fighting Vanessa, watched the violations and fines escalate until residents had no choice but to sell and leave. I couldn't risk losing the house Sarah and I bought together, the home where Emma's memories of her mother still lived in every room. So I made the decision that would haunt me. I agreed to bring Emma to that meeting, believing I could protect her just by being present. I had no idea Vanessa's compliance education would end with my daughter's head being slammed into furniture and me calling 911 while blood pooled beneath Emma's unconscious body. Rebecca Walsh appeared at my door the evening before the scheduled compliance meeting, looking like someone who'd been wrestling with her conscience for weeks. Dr. Mitchell, I'm the HOA board secretary. I need to talk to you about tomorrow's meeting with Vanessa. I recognized her. Elementary school teacher. Always voted with the board chair at meetings. Never spoke against enforcement actions. She stood on my porch wringing her hands, glancing over her shoulder at her car like she might flee any second. What about the meeting? Don't bring Emma. Her voice shook. Please. I've been at every compliance meeting Vanessa's held with children over the past 4 years. What she does in that room, it's not education. It's intimidation. Then why haven't you said anything? Rebecca's hands trembled as she pulled them from her jacket pockets, then shoved them back in. She shifted her weight from foot to foot, unable to meet my eyes. Because Vanessa threatened my teaching license. Last year, I questioned her enforcement approach with the Patterson girl, the lemonade stand case. The board chair filed a complaint with the state education board, claiming I'd shown unprofessional conduct by supporting a family against HOA authority, said I was undermining community standards, and that my judgment about appropriate child discipline was questionable. Did the complaint go anywhere? No, but the investigation lasted 3 months. My principal questioned whether I was fit to teach. Parents heard rumors. I almost lost everything. She finally looked at me, eyes red from crying. Vanessa made it clear, if I ever opposed her enforcement again, she'd find something that would stick. My career would be over. So you've stayed silent while she terrorizes children? I documented everything. Rebecca pulled out her phone with shaking hands, showed me notes app filled with entries. Every meeting, every child who left crying, every parent who begged Vanessa to stop and got threatened with more fines. I kept records because I knew someone would eventually fight back. She scrolled through entries. Martinez boy, age 8, crying, asking why soccer ball was bad. Vanessa raised voice, made him repeat, I disrespected community 5 times. Chen grandson, age 6, asked for his grandmother. Vanessa said big boys don't need grandmas at meetings. Child wet himself from fear. Thompson twins, age 7. Vanessa made them stand in front of board, asked which twin was more responsible for bike violation, forced them to blame each other. Patterson girl, age 9, sobbing, Vanessa wouldn't let her leave until she apologized sincerely. Meeting lasted 90 minutes. My hands clenched reading those entries. These are children. She's traumatizing kids over yard violations. She believes strict enforcement teaches respect, that parents who let children run wild need to learn consequences matter. Rebecca's voice dropped to barely a whisper. But tomorrow's meeting is different. She's angrier about your appeal than I've ever seen her. She told the board you're undermining her authority, and Emma needs to understand what happens when families disrespect rules. What does that mean? It means she's planning to make an example of Emma, to show the community what happens when parents contest her decisions. Rebecca looked at me with desperate eyes. I can't testify officially. I can't risk my teaching career, but I'm begging you, don't bring your daughter into that room tomorrow. If I don't, Vanessa files lien proceedings. We could lose our house. If you do, Emma will be traumatized the way those other children were, and Vanessa's getting worse, more aggressive, more convinced that children who violate standards deserve harsh consequences. Rebecca backed toward her car, still unable to maintain eye contact for long. I won't be at the meeting tomorrow. Vanessa scheduled it on my teaching day, so I couldn't witness it. But Dr. Mitchell, whatever happens in that room, document everything. Because someday, someone's going to stop her. And when they do, my records will prove this wasn't one incident. It's a pattern. She drove away, leaving me with a choice Sarah would never have forgiven. Bring Emma and risk trauma, or refuse and risk losing our home. I chose wrong. I woke Emma at 2:30 the next afternoon to prepare for the 3 o'clock meeting. She sat on her bed holding the stuffed rabbit Sarah had given her, anxiety radiating from every movement. Do I really have to go talk to the HOA lady about my bike? It's just a quick meeting, sweetheart. I'll be right there with you the whole time. Mrs. Chen's grandson said the HOA lady is mean, that she yells at kids who break rules. Emma's hands tightened on the rabbit. Did I break a really bad rule by leaving my bike on the lawn? You didn't break any rule. You forgot your bike outside after playing. That's normal kid stuff. Then why does she want to talk to me? I knelt beside Emma's bed, fighting the urge to cancel the meeting and accept whatever consequences Vanessa threatened. Sometimes adults take rules too seriously, but I promise, nothing bad will happen. I'll be right there. That promise would break within the hour. We drove to the HOA office at 2:55. The building was small, Converted house with administrative offices downstairs and conference room upstairs. Vanessa's domain. The board chair met us in the lobby, clipboard in hand, expression cold. Dr. Mitchell, Emma, follow me. She led us down a narrow hallway to a windowless conference room. 1 table, 4 chairs, fluorescent lights that hummed with electrical buzz. No windows, no second exit. Emma's hand gripped mine tighter as we entered. Sit. Vanessa pointed to chairs across from hers, then closed the door. The click of that lock engaging should have been my warning. Emma, do you know why you're here? My daughter's voice was tiny. Because I left my bike on the lawn? Because you violated community standards. Because your father thinks rules don't apply to you. The HOA president leaned forward, eyes fixed on Emma. Do you understand that your actions have consequences? That leaving recreational equipment in visible areas lowers property values for everyone in Riverside Meadows? She's 10 years old. She doesn't need a lecture about property values. She needs to understand responsibility. Vanessa's voice hardened. Emma, I need to hear you say it. Say, I violated community standards. Emma looked at me terrified. I nodded, trying to communicate that saying the words would end this faster. I violated... Emma's voice broke. Tears started. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. Don't cry. Take responsibility like an adult. Emma flinched, started crying harder. This is exactly the problem. Parents who coddle children instead of teaching them consequences. The board chair turned her attention to me. You're raising a daughter who thinks tears get her out of following rules. This meeting is over. I stood, pulling Emma with me toward the door. Vanessa moved faster, blocked the exit with her body. Sit down. This meeting ends when I say it ends. Move aside. We're leaving. You came here requesting my time for compliance education. You don't get to walk out because your daughter can't handle being told she did something wrong. I stepped toward the door, Emma clutching my hand. Move. Now. That's when Vanessa made her fatal mistake. She grabbed Emma's arm, yanked her away from me. Let go of my daughter. She needs to learn. I pulled Emma back. The board chair's grip tightened. Emma cried out. And then Vanessa, face flushed with rage at being defied, at having her authority challenged in her own conference room, shoved my daughter backward with both hands. Emma's feet tangled. She fell. Her head struck the corner edge of the conference table. The crack of skull against wood. Then Emma collapsed to the floor, unconscious, blood pooling beneath her head from where the table edge had split her scalp. I dropped to my knees beside her, checked pulse, breathing, both present, but she wouldn't wake. Blood spreading across the industrial carpet. Vanessa stood frozen, hand still extended from the shove. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911. I need an ambulance. HOA office, 2847 Riverside Boulevard. 10-year-old female, unconscious, head injury, bleeding from scalp laceration. The operator asked what happened. Before I could answer, Vanessa spoke. The words that would destroy her defense. She wouldn't have been hurt if you'd taught her to follow rules. The ambulance arrived within 7 minutes. Paramedics stabilized Emma's neck, bandaged the bleeding, loaded her onto a stretcher while I held her hand, and Vanessa stood silent in the corner of that conference room. Are you the parent? The lead paramedic asked me. Yes, I'm her father. And you? He looked at Vanessa. HOA president. This was an accident during a compliance meeting. The paramedic's eyes narrowed. Compliance meeting with a 10-year-old? What kind of compliance? Community standards education. The board chair's voice was defensive now, uncertain. Sir, do you want police here? The paramedic asked me directly. Yes. This wasn't an accident. She shoved my daughter. Vanessa's face went pale. That's not what happened. The child was being disruptive, tried to leave without permission, lost her balance. You grabbed her arm and shoved her backward. I watched it happen. The paramedic radioed for police presence at the scene while they transported Emma to Memorial Hospital. I rode in the ambulance, watching my unconscious daughter's chest rise and fall, the bandage on her head already soaking through with blood. At the hospital, Dr. Patricia Morrison met us in the emergency bay. Head trauma, unconscious approximately 9 minutes, bleeding from scalp laceration. The paramedics' report was clinical, efficient. They rushed Emma into trauma bay, I stood helpless while medical staff swarmed her, vitals, pupils, CT scan ordered for possible skull fracture or brain bleeding. Dr. Morrison pulled me aside. What happened? HOA president shoved her during a meeting. Emma fell, hit her head on table edge. An adult shoved a child? During an HOA meeting? Over a bicycle violation. The doctor's expression hardened. I'll document this as assault-related injury. The police will want medical records showing mechanism of injury consistent with being pushed. While Emma underwent CT scan, I sat in the waiting room and did what 15 years as a prosecutor had trained me to do. I started documenting evidence. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what Vanessa had been doing to Riverside Meadows families. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. Mrs. Chen answered on the second ring. Dr. Mitchell? I heard ambulances at the HOA office. Is everything okay? Vanessa shoved Emma during a compliance meeting. She's in the hospital with head injury. Silence. Then, oh my God, I told you she was dangerous with children. I need to know everything. Every family she's targeted. Every child she's traumatized. Every parent she's threatened. Can you help me? I'll call everyone. Give me 2 hours. Next call. The Martinez family who'd left Riverside Meadows 3 years ago. Mr. Martinez, this is David Mitchell. I'm a resident in Riverside Meadows. Vanessa Hartley assaulted my daughter today during a compliance meeting. I'm gathering information about other families she's targeted. She put her hands on your child? His voice shook with rage. We left that neighborhood because of what she did to our son. He had nightmares for months after she made him stand in front of the board and confess to disrespecting community standards over a soccer ball. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what happened? Absolutely. We thought we were alone, that no one would believe us about an HOA president traumatizing an 8-year-old over yard violations. I made 8 more calls over the next 90 minutes while waiting for Emma's CT results. The Thompson family, twins lectured for an hour, made to blame each other, both developed anxiety about playing outside. The Patterson family, 9-year-old's lemonade stand shut down, child told she was disrespecting neighbors, cried for days. The Rodriguez family, 7-year-old made to apologize for chalk drawings, wouldn't draw anything for months. Every family had the same story. Normal childhood activity treated as serious violation, Vanessa demanding children attend compliance meetings, kids traumatized by aggressive lectures from an authority figure, families eventually leaving Riverside Meadows to escape the targeting. 15 families total, spanning 4 years of Vanessa's presidency. A systematic pattern of using HOA enforcement to terrorize children and drive families out of the community. Dr. Morrison found me in the waiting room at 6:15. Emma's awake. CT shows concussion, but no skull fracture or brain bleeding. She'll need monitoring overnight, possibly longer depending on symptoms. The scalp laceration required 12 stitches. Can I see her? Yes, but Dr. Mitchell, as the treating physician, I'm required to file a report with Child Protective Services when injuries result from adult violence against minors. The police are already here taking statements. This is going to become an official investigation. I walked into Emma's room and saw my daughter, small, bandaged, connected to monitors, and felt every ounce of protective failure crash over me. She looked at me with eyes too old for 10. Dad, I'm sorry I didn't say the words right. I'm sorry I made the HOA lady mad. My daughter was apologizing for being assaulted. That's when I made my choice. I was going to use every skill I'd learned prosecuting child abusers to destroy Vanessa Hartley. I sat beside Emma's hospital bed while she slept, her head bandaged, monitors beeping steadily, and called my former supervisor at the district attorney's office. Marcus, it's David Mitchell. I need to talk to you about filing criminal charges against someone who assaulted my daughter. David, slow down. What happened? I explained everything. The bicycle violation, the escalating fines, the mandatory compliance meeting, Vanessa grabbing Emma's arm, shoving her backward, Emma's head hitting the table, the concussion, the 12 stitches. An HOA president physically shoved a 10-year-old during an enforcement meeting, and then blamed me for not teaching her to follow rules while Emma was unconscious and bleeding on the floor. Marcus was silent for a moment. You know I can't assign this case to you. You're the victim's father. I'm not asking to prosecute. I'm asking you to let me build the case and hand it to someone who will. I looked at Emma's small form in the hospital bed. I have 15 families willing to testify about a pattern of targeting children. I have medical documentation of assault-related injuries. I have the treating physician's statement. And I have 72 hours before Vanessa's attorney spins this as an accident. What are you asking for? Aggravated assault on a minor, battery causing bodily harm, child endangerment, and I want it filed fast before she destroys evidence or intimidates witnesses. David, you were a prosecutor for 15 years. You know what you're describing. I know exactly what I'm describing. Felony charges that could send her to prison for up to 5 years. My voice hardened. She grabbed my daughter, shoved her into furniture, caused a head injury that required hospitalization and stitches, then blamed the child for being hurt. That's not an HOA dispute. That's criminal assault on a minor. Build the case. Document everything. I'll assign it to Sarah Chen in the Violent Crimes Unit. She specializes in cases involving child victims. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and started the work I'd done hundreds of times as a prosecutor, building a criminal case. Evidence inventory, medical records documenting head injury, concussion, laceration, requiring 12 stitches. Dr. Morrison's statement that injuries consistent with being pushed 911 call recording capturing Vanessa's blame statement. Witness testimony from 15 families about pattern of targeting children. Rebecca Walsh's documentation of previous compliance meetings. Photos of the conference room showing table edge that caused injury. Emma's statement about what happened. I had 72 hours before evidence degraded, before witnesses' memories became less reliable, before Vanessa's attorney could establish an alternative narrative. But I also had something else. 15 years of experience prosecuting adults who hurt children. I knew how to build overwhelming cases, how to document patterns of abuse, how to present evidence that made juries see defendants not as authority figures but as predators who targeted vulnerable victims. Vanessa thought HOA authority protected her from consequences. She was about to learn that physically injuring a child triggers the exact criminal justice response I'd spent my career implementing. Emma stirred in the hospital bed, opened her eyes. Dad, I'm right here, sweetheart. My head hurts, and I keep seeing the HOA lady's face when she pushed me. She looked so angry. I know, but you're safe now. She can't hurt you anymore. Are we going to lose our house? Because I didn't say the right words at the meeting? My daughter, concussed, stitched, traumatized, was worried about losing our home because an HOA president had assaulted her. We're not losing anything, I promise. Mom would have protected me better, wouldn't she? She wouldn't have let the HOA lady hurt me. That sentence shattered me. Emma was right. Sarah would have never brought her to that meeting, would have fought the liens, accepted the consequences, kept Emma safe. I'd failed to protect our daughter the way her mother would have. But I could honor Sarah's memory by ensuring the person who hurt Emma faced every criminal charge I knew how to bring. Your mom would be proud of how brave you were today, and she'd want me to make sure the HOA president who hurt you faces justice. Emma's eyes closed again, exhaustion and medication pulling her back to sleep. I returned to my laptop and continued building the case. By midnight, I had preliminary evidence package ready. By 6 a.m., I'd interviewed 8 of the 15 families by phone. By noon the next day, I'd have witness statements, medical documentation, and pattern evidence showing Vanessa's systematic targeting of children. And by 72 hours after the assault, I'd have criminal charges filed that would destroy the board chair's authority and send a message to every HOA official in Georgia. You don't get to hurt children and hide behind community standards. If you've ever stood beside your child's hospital bed knowing you failed to protect them from an authority figure who caused measurable harm, stay with me. Because what a former prosecutor does with 72 hours to build a criminal case against the HOA president who assaulted his daughter doesn't just result in arrests. It triggers the kind of justice system response that changes how an entire state treats officials who abuse power against children. Vanessa had made her choice when she put her hands on Emma. Now, I was making mine. Complete prosecutorial destruction using every skill I'd spent 15 years perfecting. The clock was ticking, and the board chair had no idea what was coming. Rebecca Walsh called me at 7 a.m. the next morning while Emma slept in the hospital bed, her concussion symptoms stable enough that discharge was planned for later that day. Dr. Mitchell, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. If I'd done more to warn you. You did warn me. I made the choice to bring Emma anyway. I need to tell you something. Yesterday after the ambulance left, I went to the HOA office. Her voice shook. Vanessa was still there. She was cleaning the conference room, scrubbing the blood from the carpet. And she told the other board members that Emma had an accident when she became disruptive and tried to run from the meeting. She's already establishing her defense narrative. It gets worse. She's calling an emergency board meeting tonight to discuss implementing safety protocols for compliance meetings with uncooperative residents. She's going to spin this as Emma being out of control, not her shoving a child. I sat up straighter. Rebecca, I'm building a criminal case. I need you to testify about what you've witnessed. Silence on the line. Then, you know she'll destroy my teaching career if I testify against her. She assaulted my daughter, put her in the hospital with a concussion, made a 10-year-old apologize for being injured. I know, and I've been sick about it since I heard. Rebecca's voice broke. But I have a daughter, too. She's 12. If I lose my teaching license, I can't support her. Vanessa filed that complaint against me last year over nothing. Imagine what she'd do if I testified in a criminal case. The prosecutor can subpoena you. Your testimony wouldn't be voluntary. But everyone would know I provided evidence. The other teachers, the parents, the school board. Vanessa has connections. She'd make sure I never taught again. I understood her fear. Vanessa had spent 4 years building power through intimidation and threats. Rebecca was trapped between protecting children and protecting her own child's future. What if I could guarantee legal protection? If the prosecutor offers immunity from any retaliation? If we document Vanessa's threats as witness intimidation? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. I heard her breathing, heard the war between conscience and survival. I kept records for 4 years because I knew someone would eventually fight back. I documented every child she traumatized, every parent she threatened, every compliance meeting that crossed from enforcement into abuse. Her voice steadied with resolve. I have notes on my phone from yesterday. I was in the building when it happened. I heard Emma crying. I heard you shouting. And I heard the sound of her hitting that table. You were there? I was waiting in the lobby for a different meeting. The walls are thin. I heard Vanessa tell Emma to stop crying. Heard her say, "This meeting ends when I say it ends." Heard you say, "Let go of my daughter." And then Rebecca's voice cracked. Then I heard the impact, and Emma went silent. Why didn't you come in? Because I'm a coward. I heard a child get hurt, and I stayed in the lobby because I was afraid of losing my job. She was crying now. I listened to you call 911. I watched the paramedics carry Emma out unconscious, and I did nothing. You're doing something now. After the ambulance left, I confronted Vanessa, told her she'd gone too far. She looked at me and said, "That child needed to learn respect. If you have a problem with my enforcement methods, remember what happened last time you questioned my authority? Your teaching license is one complaint away from review." She threatened you again? After assaulting a child? She doesn't think she did anything wrong. She genuinely believes Emma needed to learn consequences and that you undermined her authority by trying to leave the meeting. Rebecca took a shaky breath. I'll testify about everything. The pattern of targeting children, the traumatic compliance meetings, what I heard yesterday, and Vanessa's threats against me, because my daughter is 12. In 2 years, she could be the one in that conference room, and I can't let Vanessa keep hurting children because I'm afraid. The prosecutor will protect you. Document every threat, every intimidation attempt. That becomes additional evidence. I'm sending you my 4 years of notes right now. Every compliance meeting, every traumatized child, every family driven out. Her voice hardened. Vanessa told me yesterday that Emma wouldn't have been hurt if parents taught children to respect authority. She blamed your daughter for being assaulted. I have that on the 911 recording too. Then use it. Use everything. Because I've watched her terrorize 15 families and I stayed silent to protect myself. But Emma's in the hospital because I didn't speak up sooner. Rebecca's documentation arrived in my email minutes later. 4 years of detailed notes documenting systematic child targeting, traumatic compliance meetings, and Vanessa's escalating aggression toward families who contested her authority. It was prosecutorial gold, combined with medical evidence, witness testimony from 15 families, and Rebecca's first-hand account of hearing the assault. I had everything needed to file criminal charges. The board chair thought she could spin Emma's injury as an accident. She didn't know a teacher she'd threatened into silence for 4 years had just become the witness who would destroy her defense. I spent the next 48 hours in my law office building the criminal case with the precision I'd used for 15 years in the prosecutor's office. Started with the legal framework. Georgia Code, paragraph 16 to 5 to 21, aggravated assault. Commits assault with intent to cause bodily harm or with an object likely to cause serious injury. Penalty, 1 to 20 years imprisonment. Georgia Code, paragraph 16-5-23.1. Battery, intentionally causes physical harm to another when victim is under 14 years old. Felony with enhanced penalties. Georgia Code, paragraph 16 to 5 through 70. Cruelty to children, causes cruel or excessive physical pain to a child under 18. Felony carrying 1 to 10 years. Vanessa had violated all 3 statutes when she shoved Emma into that table. Next, I organized the evidence into prosecutorial presentation format. Medical documentation. Dr. Morrison's report detailing concussion, 12-stitch scalp laceration, injuries consistent with being forcefully pushed into furniture edge. Hospital photos of Emma's head wound. CT scan results. Discharge papers recommending neurological follow-up. Physical evidence. Photos of the conference room showing table edge height matching Emma's injury location. Blood evidence on carpet before Vanessa cleaned it. 911 call recording capturing Vanessa's blame statement. Eyewitness testimony. My account as Emma's father who witnessed the assault. Rebecca Walsh's statement about hearing the confrontation and impact through walls. Paramedic observations of scene and Vanessa's demeanor. Pattern evidence, 15 families' testimonies about Vanessa systematically targeting children. Rebecca's 4-year documentation of traumatic compliance meetings. Evidence showing escalating aggression toward families who contested authority. Victim statement. Emma's account of being grabbed, shoved, hitting her head. Her statements about fear and trauma. I compiled everything into a comprehensive case file and delivered it to Sarah Chen at the DA's office Wednesday morning, exactly 60 hours after the assault. Sarah reviewed the evidence for 2 hours while I waited. David, this is one of the strongest assault cases involving a minor I've seen. The medical evidence alone is damning. The pattern evidence shows premeditation and systematic targeting, and the 911 recording where she blames a concussed child for being injured. Sarah looked up. This isn't borderline. This is clear-cut felony assault on a minor with aggravating factors. What's the timeline for charges? I can present to a judge for arrest warrant today. With this evidence, we'll have probable cause within hours. She paused. But David, you know what this means. Once we arrest an HOA president for assaulting a resident's child, this becomes major news. Your daughter's trauma becomes public. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to make sure no other child in Riverside Meadows gets shoved into furniture by an authority figure who thinks compliance education justifies violence. Then let's file charges. By Wednesday afternoon, Sarah had secured arrest warrant from Judge Robert Chen, the same family court judge I'd worked with for years on child welfare cases. Thursday morning, I filed for emergency protective order prohibiting Vanessa from any contact with Emma or coming within 500 feet of our property. The order was granted immediately based on documented assault and Emma's testimony about ongoing fear. Thursday afternoon, I filed civil lawsuit against Vanessa personally and the HOA corporately, assault and battery on a minor intentional infliction of emotional distress, creating hostile environment for families with children, abuse of authority, pattern of harassment targeting minors, seeking compensatory damages for medical bills and Emma's trauma, plus punitive damages for egregious conduct. I also did something else, something I'd learned as prosecutor that civilian attorneys rarely understood. I contacted Riverside Meadows Liability Insurance Company directly. This is David Mitchell, attorney representing a minor child who was physically assaulted by your insured's HOA president during an enforcement meeting. I'm calling to notify you of pending criminal charges and civil lawsuit that will create significant liability exposure. The insurance adjuster's tone shifted immediately. What kind of assault? HOA President Vanessa Hartley grabbed my 10-year-old daughter's arm, shoved her backward into a conference table during a compliance meeting, causing head injury requiring hospitalization, concussion, and 12 stitches. She's being charged with aggravated assault on a minor, battery, and child endangerment. Civil suit seeks punitive damages for pattern of targeting children over 4 years. The assault occurred during official HOA business? During a mandatory compliance meeting in the HOA office. Your insured required my daughter's attendance, and the president physically injured her when we attempted to leave. Silence. Then, we'll need to review the policy. Intentional acts of violence may not be covered. And if there's a pattern of targeting minors, that's systematic liability we didn't underwrite for. I'm providing notice as required. The criminal charges will be filed within 24 hours. The civil suit is already filed, and I have 15 other families willing to testify about similar targeting of their children. The insurance implications were critical. If the company determined Vanessa's assault wasn't covered, the HOA would face massive uninsured liability. If they threatened to drop coverage entirely unless Vanessa was removed, the board would have financial incentive to act fast. By Thursday evening, 70 hours after Emma's assault, I had criminal arrest warrant, secured emergency protective order, granted civil lawsuit filed, insurance company notified of liability exposure. 15 families ready to testify, medical and pattern evidence documented, Rebecca's testimony secured. Everything was positioned for simultaneous legal, criminal, and financial pressure. The board chair thought she could spin the assault as an accident and continue her presidency. She had no idea that by Friday morning, she'd be under arrest facing felony charges that could send her to prison for up to 20 years. Vanessa had 72 hours of freedom left, and she didn't even know the countdown had started. Friday morning at 6 a.m., 72 hours after Emma's assault, 2 detectives from the sheriff's department arrived at Vanessa Hartley's home with an arrest warrant. Sarah Chen called me at 6:15. She's in custody, charged with aggravated assault on a minor, battery, and child endangerment. Bail hearing scheduled for this afternoon. I was sitting with Emma at our kitchen table, helping her with breakfast, while she recovered from concussion symptoms that still caused headaches and dizziness. "They arrested the HOA lady?" Emma asked, hearing my side of the conversation. "Yes, sweetheart. Because what she did to you was a crime, not an accident." "Will she go to jail?" "That's up to a judge and jury, but she'll face consequences for hurting you." Emma was quiet for a moment, then, "Good, because other kids shouldn't be scared of compliance meetings like I was." At 9 a.m., Riverside Meadows Insurance Company sent urgent communication to the HOA board that I'd anticipated but hadn't expected quite this fast. Rebecca forwarded me the email. Liability coverage review. Hartley assault incident. After reviewing police reports and civil lawsuit filed by David Mitchell on behalf of minor child Emma Mitchell, we have determined that intentional acts of violence by HOA officials are not covered under your current policy. Furthermore, pattern evidence suggesting systematic targeting of minor residents over a 4-year period creates liability exposure we did not underwrite for. Effective immediately, Vanessa Hartley must be removed from all HOA leadership positions or coverage will be terminated. Additionally, premiums will increase 340% at next renewal unless comprehensive child safety protocols are implemented, and independent review confirms no ongoing pattern of targeting families with children. The insurance hammer had dropped exactly as I'd planned. By 10 a.m., I'd received calls from 3 different board members asking if I'd be willing to meet privately to discuss resolution. I declined. This wasn't about private settlements. This was about public accountability. At 11 a.m., the Riverside Meadows board held an emergency meeting. Rebecca attended and sent me live updates. Motion to immediately remove Vanessa Hartley from HOA presidency due to criminal charges and insurance liability. Vote 6-0 in favor. Vanessa absent due to incarceration. Motion to permanently ban Vanessa Hartley from any HOA leadership position. Vote 6-0 in favor. Motion to issue formal apology to Mitchell family and all families targeted during Hartley's presidency. Vote 6-0 in favor. Motion to implement new policies. 1. No compliance meetings involving minor children. 2. Independent review of all enforcement actions. 3. Prohibition on requiring children's attendance at HOA proceedings. 4. Mandatory de-escalation training for board members. Vote 6-0 in favor. The HOA that had enabled Vanessa's targeting of children for 4 years was dismantling her authority in under an hour because insurance liability made her too expensive to protect. At 2 p.m., I attended Vanessa's bail hearing at the county courthouse with Emma, who wanted to see what happens to people who hurt kids. Judge Robert Chen presided, the same family court judge I'd worked with for 15 years on child welfare cases. The prosecutor presented evidence, medical records showing Emma's injuries, witness statements, pattern of targeting children, 911 recording of Vanessa blaming the victim. Vanessa's attorney argued for minimal bail. Mrs. Hartley is a respected community leader with no prior criminal record. This was an unfortunate accident during a routine HOA meeting. That's when Judge Chen did something I'd seen him do only twice in 15 years. He stood up from the bench. The courtroom went silent. Counsel, I've reviewed the evidence in this case. I've seen the medical photographs of a 10-year-old child's head injury. I've read witness statements describing a pattern of targeting children for compliance education. And I've listened to the 911 recording where your client blamed a concussed child for being injured. The judge's voice carried absolute authority. This was not an accident. This was an adult in a position of power who grabbed a child, shoved her into furniture, caused serious bodily injury, and then blamed the victim. He paused, looking directly at Vanessa. HOA authority does not include the right to put hands on children. Community standards enforcement does not justify physical violence against minors, and compliance education does not mean traumatizing a 10-year-old over a bicycle violation. Judge Chen sat back down, but his presence still dominated the room. Bail is set at $50,000. Conditions: no contact with victim or victim's family. No contact with any minor children in Riverside Meadows community. Surrender of all HOA access and authority. GPS monitoring. Any violation results in immediate remand to custody pending trial. Vanessa's face had gone white. Her attorney tried to object, but the judge cut him off. Your client physically injured a child during what should have been a routine administrative meeting. She will face the maximum prosecution this office can bring. Bail conditions are non-negotiable. As we left the courthouse, Emma squeezed my hand. Dad, that judge stood up. Why did he stand up? Because sometimes judges want everyone in the room to understand how serious something is. When Judge Chen stands, it means he's not just enforcing law, he's making a statement about right and wrong. What was his statement? That adults who hurt children don't get to hide behind authority or claim accidents. They face justice. The board chair who'd spent 4 years terrorizing families was now under house arrest with GPS monitoring, banned from the community she'd controlled, facing 20 years in prison. And her trial hadn't even started yet. The news of Vanessa's arrest spread through Riverside Meadows within hours, and by Saturday morning, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from families I'd never met. Parents who'd left the neighborhood years ago after the board chair targeted their children. Families still living in Riverside Meadows who'd been too afraid to speak up about violations and intimidation. Residents who'd witnessed Vanessa's aggressive enforcement but stayed silent out of fear. Mrs. Chen appeared at my door Saturday afternoon with 7 other neighbors. Dr. Mitchell, we want to help. We've been documenting Vanessa's targeting for years, but nobody would listen. Now that she's been arrested, people are finally willing to talk. They brought documentation I hadn't even known existed. Photos of children crying after compliance meetings, recordings of Vanessa's threatening voicemails to parents, copies of violation notices issued for absurd reasons like child's laughter audible from street and birthday decorations visible beyond approved time frame. One mother, Angela Rodriguez, showed me her daughter's journal from 3 years ago. My daughter Sophia was 7 when Vanessa made her attend a compliance meeting about sidewalk chalk. Sophia stopped drawing for 8 months. She wrote in her journal, "The HOA lady said my drawings were violations. I didn't know being creative was against the rules. I won't draw anymore so mommy doesn't get in trouble." Another father, James Thompson, had video from his home security camera. "This is from 2 years ago. Vanessa came to our house demanding our twins apologize for leaving their bikes on the lawn. Watch what she does." The video showed Vanessa on their porch, lecturing the 7-year-old twins, voice rising as she told them they were disrespectful children who didn't appreciate what their parents sacrificed to live in a nice community. One of the twins started crying. Vanessa didn't stop, kept lecturing for another 5 minutes while the child sobbed. "We left Riverside Meadows 3 months after that," James said. "Sold our house at a loss because we couldn't let our kids grow up afraid of the woman who controlled our neighborhood." By Sunday evening, I had testimony from 23 families spanning Vanessa's entire 4-year presidency. Every account followed the same pattern: normal childhood activity, violation issued, escalating fines, mandatory compliance meetings where children were lectured and intimidated, families eventually complying through fear or leaving entirely. Sarah Chen reviewed the additional evidence Monday morning. "David, this isn't just assault on Emma. This is systematic targeting of minors over years. Pattern evidence this strong supports enhanced charges and demonstrates Vanessa wasn't having a bad day. She was operating a campaign to drive families with children out of Riverside Meadows. Can you use it at trial?" "Absolutely. Pattern evidence shows intent, premeditation, and systematic abuse of authority. The defense will try to claim Emma's assault was isolated incident, will prove it was culmination of 4 years of escalating aggression toward children. Monday afternoon, the HOA's insurance company followed through on their threat. Coverage terminated effective immediately unless comprehensive reforms implemented within 30 days. The new board president called an emergency community meeting for Tuesday night to address the crisis. Over 200 residents packed the community center, the largest attendance in Riverside Meadows history. The interim president opened with visible emotion. Vanessa Hartley's arrest has exposed systematic targeting of families with children that our board failed to stop. The insurance company has terminated coverage due to liability from her actions. We face potential lawsuits from over 20 families. And we've discovered that property values have declined 18% over 4 years as word spread about our hostile environment for families. He paused, looking at the crowd. We failed you. We enabled someone who used HOA authority to terrorize children, and we stayed silent while families were driven from their homes. Angela Rodriguez stood. My family left 3 years ago because Vanessa traumatized my daughter. We lost $40,000 selling our house below market value. Are you offering compensation? We're establishing a victim compensation fund for families who can demonstrate financial or emotional harm from Hartley's enforcement actions. James Thompson stood. What's being done to prevent this from happening again? New bylaws prohibit any HOA official from requiring children's attendance at enforcement proceedings, ban physical contact with minor residents, establish independent oversight of all violations, and create complaint process with protection against retaliation. Rebecca Walsh stood, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. I was board secretary during Vanessa's entire presidency. I documented her targeting of children but stayed silent because she threatened my teaching career. I'm resigning from the board effective immediately. I can't represent a community I failed to protect. The room erupted. Some residents demanded her resignation. Others defended her for finally speaking up. I stood, and the room quieted. Rebecca Walsh kept records for 4 years that are now evidence in a criminal case. She risked her career to testify against Vanessa. She heard my daughter hit that table and had the courage to confront the person who'd been threatening her for years. I looked at Rebecca. She's not the problem. The culture that made her afraid to speak up is the problem. The interim president nodded. We're implementing whistleblower protections. Anyone who reports abuse of authority will be legally protected from retaliation. This community will never again enable someone like Vanessa Hartley to terrorize families in silence. After the meeting, 15 parents approached me asking if they could join the civil lawsuit. Vanessa's going to prison, one mother said. But the HOA that enabled her for 4 years needs to be held accountable too. By Wednesday, our civil suit had expanded to 23 plaintiff families seeking damages for systematic targeting, emotional trauma to children, financial losses from forced home sales, and punitive damages for enabling abuse. The board chair's arrest had triggered an avalanche, and Vanessa still faced trial for assault. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after Vanessa's arrest, giving Sarah Chen time to organize the overwhelming evidence into prosecutorial presentation. The courtroom was packed. 23 families who'd been targeted, media covering the case, HOA board members, community residents who wanted to see accountability. Emma sat beside me in the front row, her head bandage finally removed, but the scar still visible through her hair. Judge Robert Chen took the bench, reviewed the case file, then addressed the packed courtroom. This preliminary hearing will determine if sufficient evidence exists to proceed to trial on charges of aggravated assault on a minor, battery, and child endangerment against Vanessa Hartley. Vanessa sat at the defense table in a conservative suit, her attorney beside her projecting confidence. Sarah Chen presented the state's evidence methodically. Medical testimony from Dr. Morrison. Emma Mitchell suffered concussion, scalp laceration requiring 12 stitches, and documented trauma from being physically shoved into furniture by an adult authority figure. Her injuries are consistent with significant force applied to cause her to fall backward and strike her head on a hard edge. Rebecca Walsh's testimony. I heard the confrontation through the office walls. I heard Mrs. Hartley say, "This meeting ends when I say it ends." I heard Dr. Mitchell say, "Let go of my daughter." Then I heard an impact, and Emma went silent. When the paramedics arrived, I saw Vanessa standing in the conference room while Emma was loaded unconscious onto a stretcher. My testimony. Vanessa grabbed my daughter's arm when we tried to leave. Emma pulled away. Vanessa shoved her backward with both hands. Emma fell, and her head struck the conference table edge. She was unconscious before she hit the floor. The 911 recording played in the silent courtroom. My voice calling for an ambulance, the operator asking what happened, and Vanessa's statement, clear and damning. She wouldn't have been hurt if you'd taught her to follow rules. Then Sarah introduced the pattern evidence. Angela Rodriguez. Vanessa made my 7-year-old confess to violating community standards over sidewalk chalk. My daughter stopped drawing for months. James Thompson. She lectured our twins for 5 minutes while one of them cried. We left Riverside Meadows because our children were terrified of her. 15 more families testified about children traumatized, compliance meetings designed to intimidate, and Vanessa's escalating aggression toward families who contested her authority. Vanessa's attorney objected, "Your Honor, this pattern testimony is prejudicial. We're here to determine if my client committed assault, not to retry every HOA decision she made over 4 years." Judge Chen's response was immediate. "Counsel, pattern evidence demonstrates intent and refutes your client's claim that this was an accident. If Mrs. Hartley has a history of aggressive enforcement toward children, that supports the prosecution's theory of intentional assault." Objection overruled. The defense presented their case. Vanessa, claiming Emma, became disruptive, that she'd only tried to prevent the child from running from the meeting, that Emma's fall was accidental when she lost her balance. Sarah's cross-examination destroyed that narrative. "Mrs. Hartley, you grabbed Emma's arm to prevent her from leaving, correct?" I was trying to ensure the meeting concluded properly." "You put your hands on a 10-year-old child to stop her from leaving a room?" "The meeting wasn't finished." "And when Emma pulled away from your grip, you shoved her backward?" "She was being defiant." "Yes or no? Did you push Emma Mitchell?" Vanessa's face flushed. "I was establishing authority." "Your Honor, please instruct the witness to answer the question." Judge Chen leaned forward. "Mrs. Hartley, answer yes or no. Did you push the child?" Silence. Then, barely audible, "Yes." The courtroom erupted. Judge Chen called for order. Sarah continued. "And after Emma hit her head and lost consciousness, you told her father it was his fault for not teaching her to follow rules?" "I was explaining that proper discipline prevents—" "You blamed a concussed 10-year-old for being assaulted?" Vanessa's attorney stood. Objection, argumentative. Sustained. Rephrase, counselor. Sarah pulled up the 911 recording again. "Is this your voice on this recording saying she wouldn't have been hurt if you'd taught her to follow rules?" "Yes, but..." No further questions. After 3 hours of testimony, Judge Chen addressed the courtroom. "I've heard medical evidence of serious bodily injury to a minor child. I've heard eyewitness testimony of an adult grabbing and shoving that child. I've heard the defendant's own admission that she put hands on a 10-year-old and pushed her. And I've heard recorded evidence of the defendant blaming the victim for being injured." He stood from the bench again, the theatrical gesture that commanded absolute attention. "I've presided over family court for 22 years. I've seen cases of child abuse, neglect, and endangerment. What distinguishes this case is that the defendant held a position of authority and used that authority to intimidate, grab, and physically harm a child over a bicycle violation." His voice hardened. "HOA authority does not include the right to put hands on children. Community standards enforcement does not justify physical violence. And compliance education does not mean shoving a 10-year-old into furniture hard enough to cause hospitalization." Judge Chen looked directly at Vanessa. "I find probable cause exists on all charges: aggravated assault on a minor, battery causing bodily harm, and child endangerment. This case will proceed to trial. Bail conditions remain in effect." The courtroom erupted again. Families crying, media rushing to file reports, Vanessa's face pale as the weight of prosecution became real. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me. "Mr. Mitchell, Judge Chen's statement was unusually strong. What does that mean for the trial?" "It means adults who assault children don't get to hide behind authority or claim accidents. They face justice." The board chair who'd terrorized families for 4 years was headed to trial, and the judge had already made clear what he thought of her defense. Vanessa's attorney contacted Sarah Chen 3 days after the preliminary hearing with a plea offer. She'd plead guilty to reduced charges, simple battery and child endangerment, in exchange for avoiding trial and maximum sentencing. Sarah called me before responding. "It's your decision, David. We can take this to trial and potentially get the full aggravated assault conviction with up to 20 years. But trials are unpredictable, and Emma would have to testify." I looked at Emma, who was finally riding her pink bicycle again without fear, the training wheels removed last week as symbol of her healing. "What does the plea include?" "Guilty plea to battery and endangerment. 3 years probation with mandatory anger management and parenting classes. Permanent ban from any HOA leadership position in Georgia. $50,000 fine split between your family and victim compensation fund for other families. Public apology, and her agreement not to contest the civil lawsuit. No jail time? Probation violation sends her to prison immediately, and the felony conviction means she loses voting rights, can't serve on boards, has permanent criminal record. Plus, the civil lawsuit will bankrupt her." I thought about Sarah's promise, about protecting Emma, about making sure no other child faced what my daughter had endured. Accept the plea on one condition. Vanessa must appear at a community meeting and publicly admit what she did. No sanitized apology. Full accountability in front of the families she targeted. 2 weeks later, Riverside Meadows held another packed community meeting. This time, Vanessa stood at the front, her attorney beside her, GPS monitor visible on her ankle. The interim president read the terms of her guilty plea, then gave her the floor. Vanessa's voice was quiet, stripped of the authority she'd wielded for 4 years. "I pled guilty to battery and child endangerment for assaulting Emma Mitchell during a compliance meeting on May 14th. I grabbed her arm, shoved her backward, and caused her to hit her head on furniture, resulting in concussion and injuries requiring hospitalization." She paused, forced to continue by plea agreement terms. "I targeted families with children throughout my presidency. I issued violations for normal childhood activities. I required children to attend intimidating compliance meetings. I used my authority to traumatize kids and drive families from this community." Angela Rodriguez stood. "Say my daughter's name. Say what you did to Sophia." Vanessa's face flushed, but she complied. "I made Sophia Rodriguez attend a compliance meeting when she was 7 years old. I lectured her about sidewalk chalk being a violation. I caused her emotional trauma that affected her for months." James Thompson. "And my twins? I made your sons attend a meeting and lectured them while one cried. I prioritized enforcement over their well-being. 15 more families made her acknowledge what she'd done to their children, each name, each incident, each trauma. By the end, Vanessa was crying. Not from remorse, I suspected, but from the humiliation of public accountability. The Georgia state legislature passed new HOA reform legislation 6 months later, dubbed Emma's Law. It prohibited HOAs from requiring minor children's attendance at enforcement proceedings, banned physical contact with minor residents during official business, established criminal liability for officials who target children, and created whistleblower protections for residents reporting abuse. 23 families received settlements from the expanded civil lawsuit totaling $800,000. Riverside Meadows property values recovered as the community transformed from hostile to genuinely family-friendly. But the real victory was simpler. Emma rode her pink bicycle around the neighborhood without fear, played with friends without worrying about violations, understood that standing up to bullies, even adult authority figures, was not only right, but legally protected. One afternoon, she came home from riding and found me working in my office. "Dad, Mrs. Chen's new grandson visited today. He left his toy truck on their lawn and didn't get in trouble. Mrs. Chen said it's because of what you did, making sure kids can be kids. That's what your mom would have wanted, for children to feel safe in their own neighborhood. Do you think Mom would be proud that you kept her promise?" I pulled Emma close. "Your mother's promise was that I'd protect you. I failed that day in the conference room. But I made sure the person who hurt you faced every consequence the law allows. So yes, I think Mom would be proud that we fought back." Emma was quiet for a moment. "The training wheels are off my bike now. Mom taught me to ride, but I took them off myself because I'm not scared anymore. That pink bicycle, the one that started as a violation, became evidence in a criminal case and ended as symbol of childhood reclaimed. sat in our garage beside the ramp I'd built so Emma could wheel it in and out independently. Sarah's promise to protect Emma had been fulfilled through prosecution, accountability, and systematic reform. Vanessa served her probation in disgrace, banned from HOA leadership, carrying a felony conviction that followed her everywhere. The judge's statement that authority doesn't include the right to harm children became precedent cited in Georgia courts. And Emma learned what her mother had always taught her, that standing up for what's right, even against powerful adults, was the most important rule of all. If you want more stories about parents who use every professional skill they have to protect their children from authority figures who abuse power, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments about standing up to HOA tyranny or protecting your kids from officials who cross the line, and let me know where you're watching from. Because sometimes the greatest victories come from refusing to let anyone, HOA president or otherwise, hurt your child and escape accountability. Vanessa slammed my daughter's head into a desk for rules. The judge stood up and said, "Authority doesn't justify violence." And a father who broke his dying wife's promise found redemption by ensuring the woman who hurt his daughter faced justice that protected every child who came after. The bicycle violation is dismissed, the training wheels are off, and Emma rides free.